Imagine this. You play badminton every week. You've watched hundreds of tutorials. You've practiced your shots. You've played thousands of rallies. And yet, you're still making the same mistakes. Maybe you've even gotten better. But somehow, you're still losing to players you thought you'd have surpassed years ago. That's frustrating. Because we've all heard the same advice. Practice makes perfect. But here's the problem. Practice doesn't automatically make you better. Sometimes practice simply makes you better at whatever you're practicing. And that's a very different thing. Today, we're going to look at the science behind deliberate practice, the surprising 1% finding, and 7 habits that can turn your badminton practice into actual improvement. Let's go back to 1993. Psychologist Anders Ericsson and his colleagues published influential research on how deliberate practice contributes to expert performance. The idea was powerful. If you want to become excellent at something, you can't just repeat it. You need structured practice designed to improve specific aspects of performance. Years later, the idea became widely associated with the famous 10,000-hour rule. But here's where things get interesting. A 2016 meta-analysis examined the relationship between deliberate practice and performance across different domains. In sports, deliberate practice explained about 18% of the variance in performance overall. But when researchers looked specifically at elite-level athletes, the number dropped to around 1%. Now, before you misunderstand that, this does not mean practice is useless. It doesn't mean you can skip training and become an elite athlete. And it definitely doesn't mean that practice only matters 1%. It means something much more interesting. Once you're comparing athletes who are already highly skilled, the amount of deliberate practice alone explains surprisingly little of the remaining difference between them. Other things matter too. Physical characteristics, coaching, experience, psychology, opportunity, and, importantly, what you're actually practicing. Because you don't need to become an Olympic athlete for this lesson to be useful. For a recreational player, the more important question is, am I actually practicing, or am I simply accumulating court time? Habit number 1, practice deliberately. There's a huge difference between playing badminton and deliberately training badminton. Imagine your backhand is weak. You play 3 hours of doubles every Sunday. How much of those 3 hours are actually spent improving your backhand? Maybe almost none. During a match, your brain has a different priority: win the rally. So you naturally avoid your weakness. You use the shots you're comfortable with. You move in familiar patterns. And when something goes wrong, you try to survive the point. That's valuable experience, but it's not the same as deliberately isolating a weakness. Instead, imagine spending 20 focused minutes specifically working on your backhand. Controlled feeds, repetitions, feedback, progressively increasing difficulty. Then testing it under pressure. That's practice with a purpose. So don't ask, how many hours did I play this week? Ask, what did I actually improve? Habit number 2, train outside your normal club sessions. This doesn't mean you need to spend another 3 hours on court. In fact, for most working adults, that's unrealistic. Instead, close the gap between playing and training. If your footwork is inefficient, spend 20 minutes working on your first 3 steps. If your serve is inconsistent, isolate the serve. If your return is predictable, practice different return options. If you struggle to get behind the shuttle, train the movement pattern. You can even use a wall, shadow badminton, or simple footwork drills. The important thing is that the session has a job. Think about your badminton game like a project. You have a backlog of weaknesses. You identify the highest priority problem. You design a small intervention. Then you test whether it worked. You don't need more training. You need more targeted training. Habit number 3. Know what you're training for. Before you pick up the racket, ask yourself one question. What adaptation am I trying to create today? Maybe it's faster movement. Maybe it's better reaction time. Maybe it's more powerful rotation. Maybe it's a more reliable serve. Or maybe it's better decision-making. This matters because badminton isn't just about reacting to the shuttle. The best players are constantly collecting information. Look at your opponent's body position, their racket preparation, their shoulder rotation, their weight distribution, their movement direction. These cues can give you information before the shuttle has fully revealed its trajectory. That's why an advanced player can sometimes look unbelievably fast. It isn't necessarily because their nervous system is dramatically faster. Sometimes they simply started the movement earlier. Think about it. If you wait for the shuttle to tell you what is happening, you're reacting. If you read the information before the shuttle arrives, you're anticipating. And anticipation is something you can train. Habit number 4, treat sleep as training. This might sound strange. You finish a badminton session. You go home. You eat. You sleep. Nothing athletic seems to be happening anymore, but your brain is still working. Sleep plays an important role in memory and motor skill consolidation. In simple terms, some of what you practice during the day can be strengthened while you sleep. That means your training doesn't necessarily end when you leave the court. It continues during recovery. So, if you're constantly cutting sleep short to squeeze in more training, you may be compromising part of the adaptation you're training for. Think of it this way. The court gives your brain the problem. Sleep helps your brain process the lesson. You don't need perfect sleep every night. But if you're serious about improving, sleep shouldn't be treated as leftover time. Recovery is part of the training plan. Habit number 5, train your attention. And this one becomes painfully obvious when the score reaches 18 all. You make a mistake, then you think about the mistake, then you worry about making another mistake, then you make another mistake, and suddenly you're playing the previous rally instead of the next one. That's where mindfulness or focused breathing can be useful, not because meditation magically makes you better at badminton, but because it can train a useful mental skill. Notice what's happening without immediately getting carried away by it. You notice, I made an error. Reset, breathe, refocus, next rally. The goal isn't to eliminate nerves. The goal isn't to never get frustrated. The goal is to reduce the amount of time you spend trapped inside the mistake. Because in badminton, the previous rally is already gone. Your only useful rally is the next one. Habit number 6, build a body that can handle badminton. You don't need to become a bodybuilder. You need to become more capable of producing and absorbing force. Badminton asks your body to accelerate, decelerate, lunge, jump, land, change direction, and repeat all of it while you're tired. So your gym work should support those demands. Single leg strength, calf and ankle capacity, posterior chain strength, trunk control, and eventually, power. Think of strength training as a capacity investment. The stronger and more resilient your physical system becomes, the more capable it is of handling the demands you put on it. And then there's nutrition. Your body can't recover from training without the raw materials to do it. You need enough energy, enough protein, carbohydrates to support high-intensity activity, fluids to replace what you lose, and a generally varied, nutritious diet. You don't need to eat perfectly. You need to eat consistently well enough to support the training you're asking your body to do. And finally, habit number 7, build discipline instead of depending on motivation. Motivation feels great. You watch an inspiring badminton video. You feel unstoppable. You decide you're going to train 5 days a week. You buy a training plan. And then, Wednesday happens. You're tired. Work ran late. You don't feel like training. And suddenly the plan disappears. That's why motivation is a terrible long-term system. Motivation is a feeling. It comes and goes. Discipline is a system. You decide beforehand what you're going to do. And then you make the decision once, instead of renegotiating it every day. That's how athletes accumulate hundreds of ordinary sessions. Not because every session is exciting, but because the habit removes some of the decision-making. You don't ask, do I feel motivated today? You ask, what's the plan? And that's the real lesson behind the phrase, practice makes perfect. Practice matters, but practice by itself isn't the goal. The goal is adaptation, and adaptation requires more than repetition. You need to practice the right thing, with enough focus, with useful feedback, at an appropriate level of difficulty, then recover, then test whether the skill actually transfers to the game. So maybe the better phrase isn't practice makes perfect. Maybe it's purposeful practice creates progress. And here's what I want you to try. Don't change everything tomorrow. Pick one habit. Maybe you stop spending every session playing random games. Maybe you add 20 minutes of deliberate practice. Maybe you finally start tracking your weaknesses. Maybe you protect your sleep. Maybe you start strength training. Or maybe you simply stop waiting for motivation. Do it for 1 week. Then ask yourself, did I just spend more time playing badminton, or did I actually become a better badminton player? Because those two things aren't always the same, and that might be the biggest difference between practice and progress. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Badminton Stick Guy, and I'll see you on the court.